All right, Aquarius, it looks like for some of you, you may have been through a lot of difficulties when it comes to partnerships, no matter what that partnership is. But, you know, the good news here is that things are starting to change, right? The light after the dark. So from Halloween, dawn, the light after the darkness, and from hidden realms, the sacred union, partnership, and romance. And this did show up as an ally. Now, dawn is just a reminder here that, you know, there's always a fresh start and a new beginning. It says change is unstoppable, and even the most difficult times will pass, no matter how devastating they may seem. Hope is one of the most powerful motivating forces in the universe, and it's being indicated here. So having, you know, new hope, new light, you know, breaking through the darkness of dealing with possibly bad partnerships, bad relationships, right? But things are changing now, which is great. The sacred union, it says that this is the coming together of all kinds of harmonious alliances, friendship, family, businesses, and of course, romance. It says no matter what the form, this message pertains to the value of partnership and reminds you to observe the gifts bestowed upon you by this sacred union. This is a very positive omen. All right, Aquarius, here is your overall for the week. Judgment. Damn, man. You know, and it's not a bad card, and I say that every time. I just don't like looking at it. It's a judgment. So you may be, you know, having to review something right now, needing to lay something to rest, needing to make a different judgment. Something may be coming back up that you're going to have to take a look at. But, you know, it does signal a rebirth, though, for you, right? You know, just like with death here, we're talking about, you know, the phoenix. But clearly here, needing to kind of review what you've been through. Now, in the past, the Six of Swords. So in the past, you've had to move on from a difficult situation. You may still be carrying the weight of that with you. You know, with this deck, I love the Six of Swords because it's interesting to me. You know, I look at this one and I think that the person who is, you know, traveling here has only two swords in front of them. And they think that that's all they have to deal with now. They're moving on. This is all that's left. But yet there's all of this that you're not seeing. You know, and that kind of baggage and that weight, and those still having those difficult things being carried with you, right? But the whole point of the Six of Swords is to move on to a place where there's peace and calmness. You know, you may have moved on from a difficult situation, but there are some things that you may have to go back and look at. In the present, the Four of Wands, and that's perfect, right? But, you know, like I said, there just may be some things that you're going to have to deal with here. But with the Four of Wands in the present moment, we're talking about stability here, feeling like you have accomplished something, celebrating, building a life for yourself, you know, possibly moving out or moving in. You know, it just depends here. But the Four of Wands, I mean, even if you're looking at it in the reverse, it's just a delay, you know. But this is what you're trying to do right now in the present moment. After moving on from something difficult, you know, the best case scenario is the Four of Wands. You know, but we'll see here. Future conditions, the King of Cups. Now, for you, I think that as far as the energy that's surrounding you, you know, I think some of you are becoming a little bit more emotionally open, but it's not like naive like the Queen of Cups where she gets a little bit too involved. Right? Like I always bring that up when I see him versus the Queen. Now, this could be the person that you're dealing with, male or female, doesn't matter, water sign possibly. But there may be some things involving this person that may need to be looked at, that they, you know, may have moved on from, you know, or like I said, this is going to be about you. And needing to open up on an emotional level here, you know, when it comes to having to go through the review and looking at everything that, you know, you've had to deal with, you know. But that's only in order for things to continue to be stable here with the Four of Wands. I mean, everything looks fine. But if you are dealing with a person, I think it's, you know, things that you may have thought were laid to rest, but maybe they weren't. Maybe there are some things that, you know, they need to look at. Oh boy, yeah, your best path to follow the Three of Swords, you know, and you may not be happy about this. You know, this may cause some problems here if you're dealing with a person. And again, it doesn't matter what the relationship is. I mean, clearly there's, you know, this partnership, right? But with the Three of Swords, now for you, you know, if you've experienced heartbreak, maybe that's something that you forgot to kind of look at. And that's what's being brought back up. And it may be because, you know, you're getting into a situation where, you know, you're starting to build something with someone else. You know, because I'm kind of looking at the Three of Swords connected to the past with the Six of Swords. You know, you've moved on from this, but have you actually, you know, dealt with it? You know, now on the other hand, if something is coming up from the past involving somebody else, you know, you may be upset about this. You know, this is not something that you expected to deal with. You know, this should have been something that the other person has already taken care of. You know, but clearly here needing to review some heartbreak. Ooh, boy. Aquarius, what is happening here? The Eight of Cups in your environment. Now, if we're talking about difficulty that should have been moved on from, with the Eight of Cups, you may be considering leaving the situation behind if it doesn't get taken care of. That is what I kind of feel like for some of you. With the Eight of Cups, you're talking about investing a lot into something and it no longer being fulfilling for you anymore. You know, and it may have to do with a person and their baggage that they didn't take care of, that you're now having to deal with. You know, some of you may be continuously going through heartbreak involving a person that, like, you're trying to get things built with, right? But maybe it's time to stop doing that now. Wow, Aquarius, the hell. And, you know, this may be the darkness that you're going through in terms of, you know, a relationship here, right? But, you know, there's still, you know, the positive that's coming out of this, though, with the sacred union. But I don't like this. I don't like that, you know, you are feeling this way when there is at least some level of stability. But then again, right, it may be that you can't get something going. But yet you're trying, and maybe now it's time for you to stop doing that. Especially if you're continuously having to deal with that. Whew. Man, Aquarius, the fuck? The Tower is hopes and fears. I think that, you know, the fear there would be that, you know, you invest so much into something that just is going to collapse on you anyway. You know, the hope would be that, you know, all of these things that are being brought back up that should have been dealt with, you know, are going to be cleared away, right? Like absolute clean slate, you know, but the fear would be that you've built this up so much that it's just not, it's not going to withhold or withstand. Like it's just going to come falling away. Wow, Aquarius. You know, but like I said, it's like, it's because of a person that you're dealing with, though. And this may be their issues. You know, like you should have dealt with this. This should have been taken care of. You know, I'm trying to build something here, build something better, and I've invested so much into this. But now you're fearing things just, you know, collapsing on you. But, you know, with the King of Cups and future conditions, you know, is this somebody who, you know, is opening up, though, now? And being a little bit more considerate of how, you know, their past may be affecting you? Which is possible. But I don't like that, you know, the fear there is surrounding the Tower. I mean, it makes sense to me, but why does it have to be that drastic? You know? And that may be why you're needing to kind of review everything here before you continue. Oh, and then coming out the Eight of Swords. If this person is stuck and they, you know, can't actually deal with what they should have dealt with, you know, you may be kind of looking at this a little bit differently. Like, you know, I don't know that I really want to do any more here. I don't know that I really want to invest any more in this. Now, for some of you, you may feel stuck, like there's nothing you can do about it. You know, but you may be looking at, you know, how to deal with this, though, with judgment. Like, you know, you're being forced to look at this again when it should have been over with. All right. The Ace of Swords. Let's start there. Shit. With the Eight of Swords, you know, it's being stuck with the truth of a situation, right? You know, you may think that you have moved on from this, or you may think that, you know, the other person has dealt with this, but the truth of that is coming out, which is why we're reviewing things, right? But also needing to face the truth here, right? Or somebody needing to do that. The Ace of Pentacles, they're a beautiful opportunity, especially with the Four of Wands. But the thing is if we're still having to deal with things that should have been already dealt with, that may be where you're like, you know what, I've invested so much into this. You know, I don't know if I want to even look at this now, especially if everything is just going to collapse. Like, what was the point here? You know, it was supposed to be a beginning that was going to be long lasting, right? You know, but I still feel like the opportunity is there. You know, but it all depends on either, you know, the things that you haven't dealt with, or another person here that needs to deal with some things. Now with a death, damn, man. And again, right, the change, the phoenix rising from the ashes here, but something definitely is going to come to an end. You know, and with the Tower, it may not be a bad thing. But the thing is with the Eight of Swords, you know, there, I feel like if you're dealing with another person, there isn't much that you can do. You know, you may literally have your hands tied in this situation. There's not really anything that you can do. And that may be where you're feeling stuck. You know, the opportunity is definitely there, but with the death, you know, it's going to be up to the other person here to, you know, put an end to some things here that should have been over and done with. You know, this shouldn't be coming back up. You know, for you, this has to be over with. Absolutely, this has to be over with. This can't continue. You know, and if you are dealing with a person that's got some bullshit that they're dragging into, you know, what you're trying to build here, right? It may be that they're needing to let go and stop clinging on, you know. But I feel like they're going to have to take care of this situation. Wow, Aquarius. Yeah, this definitely needs to come to an end. It needs to be over with, but I don't know that there's much that you can do about this, you know. And I don't like how it's lining down here, but coming out this way, I mean, you know, it could be that you need to kind of look at yourself, though, too, and stop, you know, putting yourself in situations where you feel like you're stuck because of the way that you're feeling. But I don't know. I think that this has to do with another person who needs to put something to an end once and for all here that they should have dealt with in the past. All right. For those of you who are single, or finding yourself newly single, or if you're thinking about wanting to be single, you're being asked now to give your relationship a chance. With the Five of Swords, this is overcoming feelings of inadequacy. That is what the Five of Swords is about with this deck. You know, needing to overcome the feeling of like not being good enough, or somebody else is needing to get over that now, right? And that may be why you're like looking at the relationship going, you know, I don't know if I want to be involved with somebody who can't get over, you know, their feelings of not being good enough, because, you know, there's nothing that you can do to change that for them, right? But again, you're being asked to give the relationship a chance. You know, and for some of you, it may be you getting over those feelings. Now, for those of you who are in a relationship, there are romantic feelings there, but somebody needs to take control of where the relationship is headed. With the Chariot, right, it's the sneak attack. You know, somebody coming out of nowhere and saying, okay, now I want to take control of where we are headed. You know, here I am. I want to be a part of this relationship. Let's get it back on track, right? And there's still a lot of feelings there, and that's great. But they are the ones, I'm telling you, that are going to have to get control over bullshit from the past that they should have dealt with, you know? And for you, again, it's like being stuck with the way that you feel and, you know, not being able to move on from some heartbreak here and needing to really look at things, especially if you're wanting to build something with somebody else, right? But the thing is I still look at that Eight of Cups in the Tower and go, damn, man. You know, this is investing a lot into something and then just having it to completely fall away on you, or fearing that that's what's going to happen because you're continuously having your heart broken, you know, which is possible for some of you. But I don't think that, you know, like I said, if you're dealing with a person here, that opportunity is absolutely there with the Four of Wands and the Ace of Pentacles. The problem is the things that should have been dealt with. And I don't think that there's anything that you can do about it. And I do think that death being connected to the King of Cups, if you're talking about the person you're dealing with, they're going to have to bring something to a close for good and not have it continuously being brought back up. But because of that, you know, you're the one that's kind of going through the review. And you may be considering moving on from this. You know, but I'm still looking at you very much, you know, having a connection here, especially with sacred union. You know, there may be light coming in after this darkness, right? With dawn showing up. You know, I don't think that this is a relationship that needs to come to an end if that's what we're talking about here. And I feel choked up looking at it, you know, because that Four of Wands and that Ace of Pentacles is perfect. But the truth of the past is definitely coming out here. And you may have to, you know, look at it and make a choice. But everything that I'm seeing here is saying that this isn't something that I think that you should let go of just yet.